All right, I want to talk about creativity and reasoning, and I want to talk about a few tools that we have for taking a more creative approach to reasoning, all right, that we haven't really discussed yet. So let's get started here. We're talking about three different things: thought experiments, reasoning by analogy, and counterfactuals. Okay, so let's talk about thought experiments first. Thought experiments are experiments which can't, or lots of times shouldn't, actually be run or performed, but yield interesting results when we think about it. Okay, when it's run inside of our minds, when we run the experiment in our head. Okay, so these can be useful for a number of reasons. They are interesting, for one, just interesting to think about. And Dan Dennett, who's a philosopher we've talked about a number of times in class, because he's where we get our thinking tools for Thinking Tools Thursdays. You can call a lot of these intuition pumps. So you set up a thought experiment, and we'll show some examples in a second, but you set up a thought experiment, and then you kind of turn the dials on the thought experiment. What if we increase this, or what if this was true in this situation, or what if this was false in this situation, and you just keep going, right? And you take the thought experiment and you change the different variables, and you probe your intuitions, you pump your intuition, all right? But they also allow for discussion around a simplified case of a more complicated discussion. In other words, if you can distill something that's complex down to the simpler thought experiment, that's lots of times easier to talk about. And it gets a little close to reasoning by analogy, but I think you'll see the difference by the end here. Now, in class, I'd show these videos of the different thought experiments. I don't think I can record some of these videos and put them on YouTube and put this video on YouTube because of copyright. So I'm not going to. I'm just going to kind of try to describe them here to give you an idea what thought experiments are kind of like. One famous thought experiment is called the Trolley Problem. And in the Trolley Problem, you ask people one of two situations, how they would behave in one of two situations. The first situation is you have 5 workers on a railroad track, okay, and there's a split in the track, and you have a lever next to you, and you can make the train, and the train's coming. You can make the train is coming, and it's going to hit the 5 people working on the track. It's going to kill all 5 of them. You can change the direction of the train using the lever, so you can make it go the other direction down the fork. So you pull the lever, and it will change the direction of the train, but there's one worker on the other train track. So the question is, do you pull the lever or not? Most people are going to pull that lever. One person dead is better than 5 people dead. Neither one is good, but take the lesser of the two evils. When you ask a question, when you change the thought experiment, people's responses change. So, same situation. Let's start with the train's coming down the track. It's going to kill 5 people, or trolley. The trolley's going down the track. Okay, it's going to kill 5 people, but you're standing on top of a bridge and you're seeing this happen, and you realize that there's a very large man close to you. Okay, and what you can do to stop the trolley is you can push the fat man off the bridge. It will land in front of the trolley. You'll kill the fat man, obviously, but you'll at least prevent 5 deaths from happening. And when the question is asked like that, there's a much lower number of people that say that they would push the fat man off of the bridge to stop the trolley. Okay, so this is the trolley problem. In one situation, we are back up. We may think that we're perfectly objective and rational, right? The idea is that we would always save one person, or we'd always take the 1 death over the 5 deaths. That would always be favorable. But when the question is in a more intimate situation, which you actually have to physically kill the person to save the other 5, rather than just pull the lever, people are more averse to that situation. So that's one thought experiment. This video, this little kid solves the trolley problem by just killing everybody. Here's another thought experiment: Mary's room. I'll try to do this justice as best I can. You might want to Google it afterwards, just to in case I mess up. But the idea of Mary's room is this: let's say that you could take someone, call her a girl, call her Mary, and you put her in a room. And the room has no color in it. It just has shades of black and white, so grays or whatever. This is the spectrum of gray, all the way from white to black, okay, obviously. So Mary, in this room, this is where she lives, this is where she grows up, all right? Ignore all of this is the thing about thought experiments. You can kind of set it up how you want, and you can ignore certain aspects. Ignore the fact that Mary is going to grow up, without talking to anyone. But she has access to the internet. She has access to any book she wants to read, any kind of information that she wants. She can learn anything she wants to about the world. Okay? But there's no color in this room. Okay, so she can learn all she wants about color. She can learn about the physics of color. She can learn about how eyes work, etc., etc. The question is, if she learns everything there is to know about color, let's pick a color. Let's pick the color red. She knows everything there is to know about the color red. Everything that can possibly be learned. Everything that can be possibly understood about the color red. When she walks out of the room and someone shows her a red apple, does she learn anything new when she sees the red apple? And so it gets at this idea of this question of, do we learn, is there some things that can only be learned by experiences? And that we can't just learn by reading or hearing someone describe it, etc. So I'd encourage you to, think about this for a minute. Think about whether Mary learns anything new, and then maybe look up some of the arguments on each side of the Mary's Room thought experiment. Plato's Cave. I'm just going to skip this one to save some time. Descartes' evil genius, I think, is a little more interesting. So Descartes was sometimes called like the father of philosophies, an early philosopher, and he said that we have to question everything. And relevant to this discussion is questioning your senses. And he would say that we can't trust, or at least we must question everything that comes in to our minds through our senses. And a lot of that can't be trusted. So for instance, if you stick a stick in the water, the stick obviously feels straight. So suppose it's a straight stick. Okay? The stick feels straight as you put it into the water. But when you look at it through the water, it looks like it's bent. Okay, so one of our senses is lying to us, right? Either the feel of the stick or the visual interpretation of what's going on. One of those is wrong. And so we need to interrogate all of our senses, everything that's coming in. And the question is, if you do that, what is left? What must be true? And then let's get into the thought experiment. The evil genius thought experiment is this idea that what if there is an evil genius that is kind of controlling everything, okay? They've set up the world, the universe, or whatever. They've set all of this up, right? So that everything that we think we know, that we think we understand, has all been put in place by this evil genius. None of it's really real. It's just this, it's all just kind of a computer program, maybe. He wouldn't have called it a computer program, obviously. But from this idea, so essentially there's this evil genius that's kind of pulling the strings on everything, okay? But from this, he says, one thing that we can be certain of is that if I can sit here and think about whether or not I exist, then I must exist. Because if I didn't exist, how could I think that I was existing, right? How could I think about my existence? So therefore, I must exist. And this is where the phrase, I think, therefore I am, comes from. If I can contemplate my existence, then how could something that doesn't exist contemplate its existence? Because that's where you get this. But the evil genius thought experiment is still really interesting because we can never really prove that there isn't somebody kind of that has either built this up as a simulation or there's someone out there, something out there pulling the strings on reality. So there's some thought experiments. Think about those, research them. They're sort of interesting. I should actually just pause here for a second. Again, I show you these thought experiments because they are useful for reasoning, creatively, right? It gets you to probe your intuitions and think about things in sort of refined ways and hopefully kind of help you develop a better kind of understanding of philosophical ideas or argument or the world or whatever.